All right, good evening, everybody. It is 5:49 p.m. on the 19th of October. It's a Thursday. I'm back over at the garage to replace both the driver's side and passenger side CV axles on a 2009 Honda Fit. So I have a Haynes repair manual that I picked up at Amazon today, or I received it today. That thing was about 20 bucks. That's a 2007 through 2013 model. I don't see any differences in reviewing this procedure for any of those model years. So anything 2007 through 2013, this should work for. I couldn't find this video anywhere, or a comparable video for a Honda Fit anywhere on YouTube. So who knows, maybe I'm the first. But anyway, like I said, it's about 5:50. That'll give you an idea of how much time this is going to take. So I'll time stamp it as I go. I may or may not get done tonight. I've never done this before on any car. But initially, this has taken about 15 minutes so far. I got the car up on jacks, and I've got the, I just developed the habit a long time ago, putting the tires underneath the car. That way, if one of the jack stands goes, at least the brake and suspension doesn't come crashing into the concrete. At least that's the idea. So this car is pretty low, so it's kind of difficult to get it up on jack stands. I'm going to back up here a little bit and get my flashlight. So the jacking point that I used for that to get it up on the jack stands was that guy right there. This piece here. This piece, I'll point to it a little better so you can see it. Sorry. It's going to take me a little bit to get used to filming in this shade, the shadows. But anyway, that's the piece that I jacked to. It looks like the mounting support for the lower A-arm, or the lower wishbone, whatever Honda calls it. But the car is pretty low. It's a little painful to get a jack in there. I used my Harbor Freight 1.5 ton rapid pump aluminum jack that I picked up a long time ago. Just barely cleared it in between the tire and the fender well here to be able to get the jack stands. And I used the normal jacking points that you would if you had to change the tire on the side of the street for the jack stands. So there's the shear, the brake that I have in my CV axle. So I'm going to take that apart. And again, I'm following exactly the Haynes manual, following that process. I do have to change the transmission oil. It calls for that when you're replacing the driver's side axle. So I'll be doing that. I'm going to do that off camera, but I'll probably show you where that nut is and kind of how that works, but I'm not going to make you suffer through watching some oil drain. But everything else is going to be as real time as I can make it. When I edit this, maybe I'll speed it up. But for now, that's the plan. So the first step of the tech manual is going to have me take off the nut for the CV axle, and then for whatever reason has me drain the transmission fluid after that. So I'm going to get my camera set up here, and then I'll show you taking that nut off. Alright, so the first thing I need to do, this is the axle hub nut, and if you'll notice, it's kind of pinched in there. It's called staking. So the first thing I need to do is I'm just going to jam a screwdriver in here with a hammer and unstake that. There's a little cutout, like a little square cutout in the nut of the, or excuse me, in the threaded portion of the axle shaft itself. That when I'm all done, I'll stake it back. But for now, I got to get that thing out so I can get this nut out. A little round punch here to help it out a little bit. Alright, and that looks pretty good there. You kind of see how that's unstaked and doesn't look like it's going to interfere when I go to rotate this or unscrew this nut. Now the trick that I'm going to have, and I'm going to try it one way and see if it works, and then I'll try it a different way. So the manual says you can either have somebody get in the car and apply the brake, or you can use a pry bar like this and turn against the pry bar and have it kind of jammed, have the pry bar kind of jammed in there between the lugs and the floor. And if you notice, I put the lug nuts back on to try and save my threads a little bit in case I have to go this route, and also so I wouldn't lose them. Or you can pop the center cap out of the wheel, and for the Fit there is a center cap. It's just a plastic cap, so I would take a punch or a piece of wood or something and pop that center cap out, put the wheel back on. Now you have access to this nut and then put the car on the ground, and then be able to use the weight of the car to prevent the wheel from turning. So the concern here that I have is I've got a broken CV axle, so I'm not going to have the transmission hooked up to this at all to be able to fight against. Obviously you can see, even though the transmission is in park right now, I can turn this, you know, any way that I want. So I'm going to hook up the air gun. I have an impact wrench here and a 32 millimeter socket. It's a beast, 32 millimeter socket, fit on there. It's not giving me a real warm fuzzy how tight this is. I'll see if I can find maybe one that fits a little bit better. But I'll put the socket on there and put the impact wrench to it and see if that works. Yep, so that's just spinning. It doesn't look like it's loosening at all. You can see the rust flying though. That's kind of interesting. All right, so with that, now we're going to try the pry bar method, where I use the pry bar to kind of trap the wheel. And I want to get this lined up so that I try to save the integrity of the threads there. So now I'll put it on. That should prevent it from turning out. Who knows? Maybe I'm going to stop the job right here as this won't come out. Yep, there it goes. So that's all it took. So that nut comes right off. The CV axles that I got did come with new nuts. I would guess and assume that that's standard for all of these, but I don't know. So right now, because of the condition that it's in, I can probably pop this out, this CV axle out, and have it in my hand because it's not attached anymore. And because I'm curious, I think I'm going to try to do that. So where'd my hammer go? There it is. So I'm just going to grab the back of this CV axle. Yep, coming right out. Yep. So there it is. All right, I'm going to pause this right now and take a better look at this thing. All right, got it over on the bench over here. You know, it's unfortunate because the boot's in really, really nice shape. The car's, you know, 9 years old or whatever it is, but I only got about 70,000 miles on it. See the damage from that rust from sitting in that rubber boot has caused to this thing. So yeah, so that's unfortunate. So now that I got that out, the next step for me is going to be drain the transmission fluid, and I'll get to that and let that go, and then I'll come back. All right, so I have a 1/2 inch breaker bar set up here, or excuse me, a 3/8 inch drive breaker bar going into the nut or the drain plug for the automatic transmission. Again, this is automatic. I don't remember if I made that point, but it'll be in the title that way. But yeah, that's it. So you don't have to worry about getting a special tool or anything like that. It's just a straight up 3/8 inch nut. Unfortunately, this thing is in absolutely the worst place it could be to get some leverage on this. So I'm going to get out from under the car here and kind of pull up. Obviously, I'm not going to lift the whole thing, but I wish the nut was tightened a little bit differently. But there you go. Now, when you do this, you want to try to make sure that you've got your drain pan far enough to, in this view anyway, the left, far enough that way, because when this rushes out initially, you're going to have a lot of fluid in there and it's going to want to shoot out a little bit. So now we're getting to the point where it's just kind of dribbling or close to it. So make sure you set your drain pan up to try to catch the arc of the fluid as it comes out. Here's the plug. It's magnetic on the end there. Happy to see that there's no heavy duty or anything really on the end of that drain plug. There's also a washer in there. Now the one I got from Napa was copper. This one looks like it's at aluminum. All right, so there's the difference in the drain plugs between the one that I got from Napa, which is here, the brass one, or the copper one, and the one that came on the car. I'm pretty confident that this washer is going to work just fine, especially since copper is a little bit more compressible than aluminum is. The thicknesses are almost identical, maybe a little bit thinner. Obviously that inner one, but that's just going to result in the washer moving around a little bit, but I don't think it's going to impact the seal at all. So I'll go ahead and use the new one. All right, so the next thing that needs to happen is this lower control arm to steering knuckle, or knuckle, needs to come out. There is a cotter pin, kind of a modified looking cotter pin in here. It's a little hokey looking. I'll show it to you when I get it out here. So that's obviously got to come out first. I'll try not to get my hands in the way here, but I can't make any guarantees. And I already messed up my screwdriver. Broke the tip of that. Now this is a very odd pin here. Let me pause this and figure this out. Alright, well that was kind of neat. Hopefully you can see that. I can't see the back of the camera at all. There's another view of it. Interesting cotter pin. I'll reuse this. It looks like it's more like just a clip than I would say a cotter pin, and you just slide it in the nut, and it kind of, this little tab over here catches. When I take it out, I'll show you a different view of it. This is a caster nut, or a castle nut, excuse me, with the holes for that cotter pin in it, obviously. It looks like about a 15 or a 17. Here's a 19. And 19 it is. Whew. All right. So there's not a whole lot to that. So we'll get this nut off here. I did spray it with PB Blaster last night, so hopefully it'll be loosened up, but we'll see how it goes here. All right. Well, that wasn't on there that tight at all. It's a beautiful thing. So we'll go ahead, take this out. I wonder if the bottom A-arm is going to drop out on me. Hope not. But the whole point of doing this is because it'll loosen up this wheel here and allow you to rotate it around and move it around so that you can get that, work the CV joint in and out. Oh no, you know what? I know this isn't going to pop because I've got to pop it with a ball joint separator. Anyway, there's the nut, just a regular castle nut, not a whole lot to it. So I'll pause it here and get with the other part. All right, so there's a couple different ways to set this ball joint separator up. But this is about the best way that I could come up with as far as, you know, where to put it with rotation and all that kind of stuff on the wheel. The concern that I have here is there's a little rubber boot under there that catches the grease. So I tried to pull that back as best I could so it didn't get pinched when I went to tighten this down. I would also like this thing in a little bit further, but it's about centered on top of the nut there. You notice the nut is on there. It tells you in the manual not to remove the nut completely, just loosen it several turns, so I did that. So essentially the ball joint separator is also kind of pushing on the nut as well. So I can't remember what size this is, 5/8 or something like that, but I'll go get a wrench here and we'll start going to town. All right, so it's 3/4. Essentially you tighten this thing down, that fills or pushes up on this back pin here. The fulcrum point is right there. It pushes down on the top of the nut slash stud, and it should separate the ball joint. If it's anything like the Triumph was, it's going to be a relatively loud pop. I don't think anything going to go flying too bad. This will get all dangly up here and everything, but we'll see what happens. It always makes me nervous. I think I might be bending the castle nut. That's not good. Hold on. Yep, I sure did. So I broke the castle nut. Started to gouge into the top of the other nut pretty good. I wonder if I'm going to even be able to get that off. Shoot. Yep, I'm going to have to pause it here. Alright, so I had to modify the ball joint separator here, and essentially all I did was take my grinding wheel to it and open up the neck of it a little bit, or the mouth of it a little bit. Now it fits much better, much farther in. Again, I kind of wiggle it as I slide it in there to try to clear that rubber seal, and it covers it much better now. So now we'll snug it up here. Alright, make sure everything seems to be lined up. I'm as centered on that nut as I can. Feels that way, everything's snug. You know, get that guy lined up there. Try to get the force. You know, I mean, it's a big fulcrum, right? You're going to put a lot of pressure on this thing. Like I said, when it goes, it's going to go. Now, unfortunately, I don't have the nut on here now. So I actually don't know what's going to happen as far as it falls. Let me get something under this real quick. I got the jack over here just in case. I assume that they want you to have the castle nut on there so that the thing doesn't go flying down, smack on the ground. If it's something other than that, well, I'm going to be in trouble, I guess. So it just barely touches. I don't even want to hardly let it touch because I don't want it to fight me. And here we go. Oh, helps to be a righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. There it goes. All right, so yes, it's very startling. Scares you. You think you broke something. Who knows? Maybe I did. You don't really find out until you get the thing all the way out. But it is a compression fit. So doesn't look like it did any damage here. Nope, doesn't look like it. So let the jack down a little bit. That doesn't move. Jack out of the way. See what happens. Yeah, there it goes. So now that allows you to kind of push down on this. What do they squeeze out here? No, that's just shadow. Allows you to kind of push down on this, right? And just kind of wiggle that thing out of the way. So now when you go to put the new joint in, you don't have to worry about it getting in your way. All right, so that's why that's like that. All right, so now I got to get under the car and try to pry this CV joint out. So I'm gonna have to rearrange stuff here. I'm also gonna put the drain plug back in the transmission and get that guy tightened back up, clean up underneath there so I don't get dripped on, and we'll go from there. All right, well, I got lucky. That slid out pretty easily. I was able to sneak up the pry bar, which I'll show you here at the tool checkout. Essentially in between this heavy duty cross member here, up in between the transmission case, right where this curve is, into the transmission case and then into the behind the CV joint mating point there. And it didn't take too much. I kind of bounced on it a little bit, but I was able to get out from under the car a little bit and get some leverage. So my feet are facing towards the passenger side here. My head's up underneath the rotor. Travesty if the car came down, obviously, but it's loose, so that wasn't very horrible. So hopefully you have just as much luck there. All right, so it slid right out after doing that. There's the end that connects up to the transmission. Again, it looks in pretty good shape here. This little slip ring here, that little guy is a little bit bigger than the diameter of the shaft, and that's really the only thing that holds that in. There's not a whole lot to it. And then you can see the corrosion that's here, that's starting around that knuckle, and this is really solid. I mean, it's rubber, but it's pretty solid. I was kind of hoping to cut that away and look inside of it, but there's all sorts of that's horrible in there. That looks really bad in there. So can't really show you too well on camera. Hopefully when I'm in the post-mortem here, I'll be able to show you a little better. All right, so there's the new one in all its glory. Conveniently, the two CV axles are different. I opened up the passenger side one, and you can see that the ends here are different. It's because of the design that's different, because the automatic transmission uses a intermediate shaft, so it makes it a little easier. Big deal with these is you want to make sure they're the right length, right? Because they flex in and out. So if you are putting in the wrong one, you're going to mess up because the thing could pop out of the transmission. But this one looks good, sizes up right, measures up right. The Rock Auto gave me the specs, and essentially installation is opposite of removal. All right, I'm going to try this camera sitting like this. It's not really attached to anything, it's just kind of sitting there, so we'll see what happens. But you can clearly see the hole for the transmission that's back there. no leakage at all evident from that seal, so I'm not going to even mess with it. So the trick that the tech manual tells you is to try to keep the split of the split ring, the spring ring, whatever that's properly called, on the bottom. And then when you insert it sharply, I believe is the term that it uses. I'm not too sure how sharp I'm going to do this, but you can see this line here, that bar, I'm not quite sure, stabilizer bar or something, it looks like for the anti-roll bar. I'm going to fish it in between there, taking care that I don't nail anything with the boot or nail anything with the splines, so they don't mess anything up here. This is actually a pretty tight fit. I think the passenger side is going to be easier. Whatever this plastic cover thing is down here, I don't know what that is, but just going to get it in there if we can. A little painful. Not painful. Move the wheel out of the way a little bit here. Try to lift this up. Feels like I'm pinching something. Let's see here. Let's see. There it went. Is that it, really? Are you telling me that that's it? No, so it's not seated. So obviously the splines are lined up, but the thing's not. Oops, I think I'm losing you here. But let me move the thing here. If you can tell, there's a gap back there. I don't know if you can really see that or not. Let me see if I can get the better light. You can see that big huge gap back there. Where are you? I don't know if you can see that. Maybe you can see it there. Big huge gap back there. Anyway, so it's definitely not seated, but at least the splines are lined up now. So it's just going to be a matter of playing with it. I'm going to pause the camera here, and really all I'm going to do is, if I can't get this to go in and seat in this direction, I'll pull it out a little bit, rotate it, and try it again, but just a bunch of iterations of that to try and get this thing in there. All right, well, that worked beautifully. I just pulled it out a little bit, and you can kind of feel resistance when the little spring pin gets in the way. So I used a little piece of shot line here to just try and pull this out of my way a little bit, so I could line the transaxle, or the CV axle came straight out above the brake line here. Pulled it out, turned it a little bit, gave it a sharp push like the tech manual said. That didn't work. Pulled it out, turned it one more time, and popped it in. And then you got to really manhandle this thing out of the way to try and use the angle to be able to sneak down into the wheel. So that's what I'm doing now. And then I'll just turn the rotor here to line the splines up so that it'll seat properly. I get the castle nut on. So this guy right here has got to go back on, and then the cotter pin for it. So we'll get that puppy in there. The socket. A wrench to get it going. And there's a torque spec. I haven't looked it up yet, but there's a torque spec in the manual on what you bring this to. A wrench, so I'm going to have to do it manually. It's no fun. Speeding this up a lot. Alright, so what's happening right now is what I was afraid of. What was happening is that joint in there spins. So what's happening is the castle nut is spinning the entire shaft of the ball joint. So maybe I can jack up the bottom of the thing here and put some weight on it. Let's see if that helps. Obviously, you don't want to lift the car sensing a difference. Maybe a little bit of difference. I have a feeling though that it's going to not let me tighten this thing up all the way. We'll see. Alright, so I got it on there. Looks good to me anyway. 47 to 55 foot-pounds of torque is what it calls for, which is quite a bit. Since I can't get a socket in there underneath the boot and a ratchet, I'm going to have to use a crow's foot. I don't have any metric crow's feet, but I got a 3/4 here. 3/4 is pretty close to the whole 19mm thing, so that's what I'm going to give a shot here, and we hope it works. Get that puppy on there, see what happens. I remember how to use this in the tightening direction. Going the wrong way for sure. Provide counter torque, or I guess I could go the whole other way. Not very easy this. Make sure I'm on there good. Yep. Alright, so that was 51 foot-pounds. So now the trick is to see if we got any holes lined up here. And of course not. We don't have any holes lined up. So that's why they give you an extra little oomph and an extra little bit of torque. Tech manual tells you don't loosen, only tighten to gather the to get the thing lined up here. So I need to rotate this thing a good, I don't know, it's got to come around a good 32nd of a turn or so. So I'll jack this thing up to top of the spec at 55 foot-pounds, not to exceed 55 foot-pounds, and we'll see how close I can get here. So 3/4 seems to be working fine. I really hate to not have the right tool for the right job, but I also really want to get done. So get this light position here so I can actually see what I'm doing. Don't make it very easy to see anything in here. That's aluminum, so that's not going to work. That might have done it. Nope. Let's see. Nope, it's smacking right into it. Alright, keep trying. Well, that's 55, so I'm going to have to come down. I don't have a choice. I'll come down and torque and then come up and try to get 47. Didn't really expect this to be a difficult part here. Obviously, it is. No, that's not going to be anywhere near it. This could be tricky. And I'm going to pause it here. This is not lining up. All right, so I did get it. And got the cotter pin in there. Essentially what I had to do was re-break the ball joint, spin the little thing back. If you remember, I got some movement on it. I didn't really think about that. And then just kind of guessed a little bit, to tell you the truth. But got it to got the holes to align and put the cotter back in. So that's torqued down to 4.7 foot-pounds, 4.8 foot-pounds, give or take. And now I'm going to torque down the nut right there, axle nut, and then stake it. Unfortunately, the spec calls for 133 foot-pounds. I don't have a torque wrench that big. I didn't really consider that. So in the light of that, I am not going to do the passenger side because I don't want to risk anything, and it doesn't appear to be in bad shape over there. I'm going to try to inspect it a little bit better because it does have that same little rubber flange. So what I'm going to do essentially is pop the cap out of the tire like I had mentioned, so I'll be able to show you that. And I'm going to put the car back on the ground after I button all this plastic up, and essentially just kind of gronk on that pretty good with a breaker bar until I feel confident that it's tight, and then stake it over. So that's my plan, and then I think I'm going to be done and give it a quick little fill of the transmission fluid up. I can't forget to do that. That'll be a quick and dirty mistake. And then we'll see how she goes. All right, so based on the corrosion that I saw and the fact that I think this side is going to be a little bit easier, I'm going for it. So really the only difference, at least that I can figure out, and I'm going to kind of turn you around and get you a little seasick here, I think. The only difference that I can really figure out, like I had mentioned, is that it's mounted different. So if you can see that, this is an intermediate shaft there, and that goes into the transmission, and there's no flex to that. So the back of the CV joint is right there. So what the tech manual tells you here is you just stick a drift up there and kind of smack at it. That might be a little tricky because there's not a whole lot of room to get some leverage, but we'll see how it goes. I'm going to just try to smack it out and see what I can do. All right, so it's 8:52, and the passenger side went in and out, or out and in, I should say, in under an hour, probably 50 minutes. Much easier on that side. It was a little bit trickier to get it banged in, but it was much easier. Of course, it helped that I had some lessons learned there. But I'm going to do the same thing as far as tightening in the axle nut on this side. Pop the little hubcap out, get the car on the ground, and essentially tighten it quite a bit. All right, so I had mentioned that you fill the transmission fluid, refill it back through the dipstick hole for the gearbox. If you can look way down there, that's the hole for filling the gearbox. So it's not a little skinny oil tube like you are used to seeing maybe on your engine oil. So this isn't bad at all. So my funnel's not long enough, but I got a little extension here, so I'll go down with that and then put the funnel in there. Sorry about me snuffing my nose. 2.6 quarts is what the manual says for a replacement when you are not, when you're just doing a drain and refill. It's a lot more than that if you flush the whole thing, but I didn't do that, and I don't want to do that. But so I'll put a couple quarts in and then start it up probably and start checking fluids from there. All right, so real quick, I got the axle nuts tightened down, but I can't get in there good with the wheel on to stake it. So I'm just going to simply pull the wheel back off, stake it, put the little cap back in the wheel, and put it back on. All right, folks, 9:41, all done. Letting the engine warm up, transmission fluid warm up, so I can check it. As a little side note, if you didn't know that you could crank up your hood really far, there's another stake hole in there to put the thing in. But anyway, I don't expect any problems. I did put it through drive and reverse and all that, and I felt the pressure of the car trying to move, so at least it wants to go. Whether or not I'm going to take it around the block or take it for a little test drive here in a bit, as soon as the oil gets warm enough. And but I don't expect any further problems. So hopefully this video helped, and it didn't seem like there's one on YouTube about the Fit CV axle replacement. So with that, have a good night. Cheers.